All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at how we can add some of our CSS using these new features that we have available to us with Sass, SCSS, some of these partials, and we can also customize some of the clay base in our theme as well. Okay, so again, if you're not already logged in for this section, make sure you're logged in to the platform, and we're going to go ahead and start modifying our theme together. All right, so go ahead and open up your theme. All right, make sure you're in your theme. You're in the source section of your theme here. So I'm going to go ahead and go in there. And of course, we have our CSS folder. All right. Now, by default, what the theme does when it's generated is it creates the custom SCSS theme for us. And like I said, this is our main CSS source file for all of our global customizations. Okay. So when we want to add our own custom CSS, it goes in here, and ultimately it is read in that main SCSS file. All right, but we can obviously modify a few things here as well. We can modify some of the clay base components and partials. And so that's exactly what we're going to do here. We're going to customize more than just this main source file. All right, so to get started, let's go ahead and go to our exercises. Okay, again, this should be in C Liferay or user home Liferay in the 03 theme development section. And then we have the 01 generating a theme and exercise source to keep our exercises distinguished from our actual theme. Okay. All right. And here, go ahead and open up the CSS folder. And just like we did with templates, we're just going to go ahead and copy some of these files over that we will modify. And then I'll explain some of these in more detail as we actually customize them. Okay. So go ahead and copy those. Come back to the theme source. And I'm going to open up the CSS folder here, and we could just simply paste our files in. And of course, we need to replace the custom SCSS with our own. And again, this is going to be similar to the portal normal we saw in the last section. We've just added our own little snippet comments and things like that that we can work with in the custom SCSS. All right. Okay, so we have a number of files here. So what we want to do is basically we want to set up the variables for our theme. So by setting up those variables, we can go ahead and obviously reuse those variables across the entire theme itself. So we want to start with setting those up. We want to add some customizations of our own, and we also want to customize some of the clay base as well. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at some of these files. Okay, so first we have the clay custom.scss, and this is where we can modify or add some custom variables for the clay base here. Okay, so if we go ahead and open this up in Visual Studio Code, we have the clay custom with a comment here. So go ahead and highlight the comment just like we've seen before. We're going to type LFR, and we're just going to go ahead and add in that first section there. Okay, and what we're doing here is we are setting some specific colors, the color scheme that we actually want for our theme, for these different variables. So we have things like the body BG, we have the colors, all right, dark, light, solid, etc. We have some decorate colors here, and we have a border that we're going to be consistently using as well. So for the general variables that we can add, we can just go ahead and include them in the clay custom. Okay. Now, because this is a partial, this is going to be included somewhere in order to actually be read when we deploy the theme. And that's going to be the import SCSS. Now, we don't need to actually change anything here, but this is where we will actually see a few things in the imports SCSS. All right. So we have the clay custom, which is what we just modified. Okay. Bourbon and the mix-ins are going to be found in here as well. So that's where we're getting some of that. All right. And then you'll see the Atlas variables and the compatibility mix-ins. Okay. Now, Atlas variables are going to be an essential part of our base theme that give us some of the variables used in that classic theme. Okay. So typically that could just be included, and you can take advantage of some of those variables. All right. Now, I do want to point out here the compatibility mix-ins. You won't see it in the exercise section here on the page. But it is worth pointing out, if I actually go into the build, and you guys don't need to do this, you can just go ahead and watch. If I go into the build here, and I go to CSS, all right, there is a compatibility folder where we can see compatibility, backwards compatibility with older versions of Clay by importing these different files. And then you have specific components, and then you have third-party options as well, such as Font Awesome. Okay, so if you want to include Font Awesome, specific components from previous versions, or any of these older versions of the variables, mix-ins, etc., make sure you check out this compatibility folder and just simply add it into your imports.sess. Okay, it's one of the ways in which we can have some backwards compatibility, so when we upgrade, we have a little bit less of a headache. Okay. All right, so keep that in mind. I'm going to go back to the source here. Just wanted to point that out here in imports SESS. I'm going to go ahead and close that. Okay. The next thing we want to do is we want to go ahead and add in our general partials variables that we will be taking advantage of. So things like colors, for example. So what we're doing is we're mimicking, again, the build folder with the partials and portlet folder here. We can open up the partials folder, and we'll see some more modularity going on here with the modules as well. We have some specific partials CSS going on here, but we also have a variables folder where we can further break down exactly what variables we want to style. Okay, so let's go ahead and add some of the colors for our partials. All right, so go ahead and open up the colors SESS. Okay, we have the second snippet comment here. Again, you can go ahead and highlight that. Type LFR and add in that second snippet. Okay. So again, what this will do is this will give us our general color palette as well. We have some things in here for things like bright color, dark color, etc., etc. So this gives us more flexibility. But this is going to give us our color palettes for background colors as well as just our regular colors here. Okay. And again, we have this broken down, so you can imagine if we have things in the variables folder, they're probably going to be imported into the variables.scss. Okay. All right, so before we take a look at that, let's also check out the buttons SCSS here, where we can provide some variables as well. These ones we're just going to go ahead and type in. There is an optional snippet you can use as well. All right, but what we're going to do here is we're going to go ahead and add some button padding. Okay. So go ahead and add a new variable, okay, with that little $sign. And we can type button dash padding. Okay, that's going to be our variable name. And then we're going to do 19 pixels by 48 pixels. Okay, we can go ahead and close that off and save. And again, if you want to use the optional, you can go ahead and just use that third optional and we'll get the exact same thing. Okay. All right, so those are just examples of the variables. Again, in your own custom theme, going with an approach like this is highly recommended. What this allows us to do is, again, provide some modularity. We have a distinct file for all of our different kinds of variables, and then we can just go ahead and import those into the variables SCSS. Okay, so if we wanted to add any new kinds of variables, we could do that in this folder and then just make sure it's imported here. All right, so let's go ahead and make sure those imports are there. Go ahead and open up the variables.scss. All right, this should be in your partials file as well. Okay, and we're just going to go ahead and write in these imports. Okay, so we know we have two files, colors and buttons. All right, so we can just do an @import. Okay, and then we need to give a little path here, so we'll do variables/buttons for the first one. All right, and of course, if you want to make things fast, you can just copy paste the second one and change buttons to colors. All right, so having this in here, okay, we will have the variables set up here, and then we can go to import this later as well to make sure it's ultimately read through our custom SCSS. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is we want to go ahead and add some variables for our portlet styling as well, or rather modify some of the variables provided in the clay base. Okay, so if you want, you can feel free to close these files. You can clear it out in Visual Studio Code. Okay, we have those files dealt with. All right, I'm going to close the partials folder for now and open up the portlet folder. Okay, now again, for those of you who may not already be familiar with this, when we say portlet in Liferay, this is sort of synonymous in the code with the widgets that we actually have on the page itself. So if you go to Liferay, you open up the add menu and you add different widgets. they're going to be styled or controlled by these different Portlet files that we have, such as the Portlet FTL or these Portlet CSS files. Okay? So let's go ahead and open up the variables custom.scss here. Okay? All right, we're going to highlight over this snippet comment here, type LFR, and we're going to add in that fifth snippet. Okay. Now these variables are going to be used in the Portlet SCSS files in the build folder. So what we're doing here is we're providing customization to these different variables so that we know when they apply in those files, they will apply with the code that we want to go ahead and modify here. All right. So again, feel free to at any point pause, investigate the build, take a look at what we're actually changing. If you want to go ahead and take a look at some of those Portlet SCSS files, feel free to pause the video and go for it. Okay, so we've got some of our variables set up. Now what we can do is we can go ahead and add some of our own custom code. We can also modify some of the partials or even add our own partials in as well. Okay, so let's go ahead and start by styling the footer. All right, we have the footer that we added to our portal normal. So if you remember in the last section, we had in our portal normal file the inclusion of a footer.ftl file. And in that file, we have the footer with a number of classes being used. And we can modify some of those things here. Okay, so we have our footer.scss. We can go ahead and open that partial up here. And let's go ahead and add in our sixth snippet, typing LFR, and add in the sixth snippet. Okay, so we're taking the IDs that we use within the footer section of the portal normal, and we're providing our own styling here. All right, and just like everything else, we will see some of that Sass nesting going on, and we will also see some of our variables in action here as well. Okay, and you can feel free at any point to change some of these variables if you want to change the color palette, or you want to sort of mess around with this a little bit to see what happens. Again, feel free to pause the video and have fun. Go at it and make some modifications. All right, so this gives us our styling for our footer. Okay, so we've styled some of these IDs. All right, and now we want to go ahead and make sure that everything that we have customized so far is imported into the custom SCSS. Okay. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and close this partials folder. Open up the custom.scss. All right, so we'll come back to some of these other things, but let's go ahead and add our imports at the top here. Okay, so first we're going to add in our variables. Okay, we need to make sure we add in our Portlet decorator file here as well, which is also in Portlets. We'll get back to that soon. Okay, so we're just making sure everything is properly imported into our custom SCSS. Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and type this out. All right, alternatively, you do have the seventh optional snippet at the top. Okay, so if you'd like to do that to speed things up, feel free. All right, but I'm going to go ahead and do my add import. Okay, and I'm going to type in partials. Okay, make sure that's plural, / variables for my first option there. For the second line here, we're going to do an add import. And this time we're going to actually do Portlet. Okay, make sure that's in there. / Portlet _ decorator. Okay, and then let's go ahead and add the rest. The rest are going to be found in the partials folder. Okay, so if we want to just look at this here, I could pull this over. I'm going to open up my partials folder, and we want to make sure we have things like our buttons, our footer, and our nav bar. Okay, we already have variables up top, so let's just go ahead and add in our imports. So we'll do partials / buttons. Okay, oops. Let's go ahead and close this off if you haven't already. Okay, and then I'm just going to go ahead and copy these and paste them and do footer and nav bar. Okay. All right, so these give us our imports. Again, if you want to double check, you can do LFR, and then you can go ahead and click on the seventh optional snippet here. This will give us everything here. So long as that looks good, that looks the same, we are good to go. Okay. All right. So now we have included our imports. And again, this is just how the partials are going to work. The custom SCSS is going to be read as the main source file. All right, so some of these other files up top are already being read elsewhere, but for any of our customizations or changes here that we want to make sure those are read ultimately through our custom SCSS. Okay. All right, but let's go ahead and add our 8th snippet here, custom SCSS. All right, so highlight this section, go ahead and type in LFR, and choose that 8th snippet there. Okay. All right, so I'm not going to go into all of the details here. Again, feel free to pause the video and investigate. But what we're doing is we are styling some of our IDs here. Okay, so for example, content and wrapper we already saw being used in the Portal Normal. And we are also styling some of our classes as well that we will be making use of either from Bootstrap, okay, or in some cases, some classes that we have created ourselves. All right. So again, feel free to pause the video at this point and investigate the file if you want to dig in and sort of get some of that detail. Okay, again, so we'll see some Sass nesting, we'll see some variables going on, and you can of course go ahead and take a look at how we are making use of the media queries as well. Okay, so this gives us our basic CSS for our theme. Again, if you'd like, you can take a look at some of these other files that are pre-created for us, and some of these will actually be coming back for as well. Okay. So in order to wrap up the style changes that we've made here, all right, we need to go ahead and add in some of our images, okay, for our theme, and then we'll actually add a logo to the platform as well, okay? All right, so before we do that, let's just sort of recap here about what we did. Again, for your own custom theme, the main CSS source file is going to be that custom SCSS, but you'll see here we've also modified some variables. Okay, these can all be found in build, and we've also modified some partials as well as some of the portlet files as well. Okay, so you can modify not only CSS in general by adding your own custom CSS, but you can actually modify the clay base as needed as well. Okay, so keep that in mind for your own custom themes that you will be working on or maybe working on. All right, so let's go ahead and get some of our images in here. So go ahead and click back on your theme. All right, to come back to source. Of course, we've already created our images folder. So let me go ahead and bring this back here front and center. All right, I'm going to open up the exercises source. Again, for all of these sections, I would definitely recommend having exercise source available. Okay, go ahead and open up the images folder. And we're going to go ahead and copy our images from the exercise source and simply add them to the images in our theme. Okay. All right, so this is going to give us a favicon, all right, and then a screenshot and thumbnail that should be on display when we can select the theme, okay. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and close that up. All right. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and jump into our site and add our logo, and then we're going to run a gulp deploy, okay. All right, so go ahead and jump into the site here. If you're not already logged in, make sure you are logged in. Again, get that server running and log in as that Josiah Copeland account. Okay, we're going to go to Build and Pages. Okay, and the same area where we added our theme, we're going to go ahead and add our logo. So we're going to go to where it says Public Pages here, click on that configuration. Okay. And under Change Current Theme, go ahead and open up the Logo section. And we're going to change the default Dxp logo. So click Change. Okay. All right, go ahead and click on Select here. And we're going to navigate to our Exercises, 03 Theme Development, and you will find the Livingston logo PNG. It's pretty much going to be the same thing as our favicon, except a little bit bigger. Okay, and we can go ahead and click Done. And then we can go ahead and click Save. All right. Okay, so from here, go ahead and open up your terminal or command line. Again, make sure you're in your theme, and let's go ahead and run that gulp deploy. Okay. All right, so once that's deployed, again, give it a couple of seconds to load, and then we can go back to our site and we should be able to see our HTML changes and our CSS changes together. Okay. Okay, and when you hit go to site, you should see right here we have some of our changes in, okay, for our styling, and we'll continue to build upon our theme and the changes that we want to make here with JavaScript in the next section. Okay, so great work on the HTML and the CSS. Next, we look towards JavaScript. I'll see you guys there.